What's up, guys? I'm Eric Hines.
And I'm Chris Otto.
And this is According to Men. Welcome back to episode 59. And this is going to be Iron Mind Perspective number 3. Chris, you got a good story to tell, brother?
Yeah, before I do that, man, I'll be damned if I'm going to allow weakness in my circle.
Amen.
And the reason I say that is because I think this is not talked about enough. The conversations that we have with not just the men that we're close with, but even acquaintances and people who come up to you, for example, at the gym. Like you have guys that come up to you and ask you questions at the gym. I've got guys that come up to me, ask me questions at the gym. And if somebody comes up to me and they say, hey, I've been listening to a podcast, or I've been following your content on social media, and I've been able to remove such and such from my life. But, you know, I've still got something that I'm holding on to, maybe a particular vice or whatever. And they start making excuses for why they're not letting that go. A weak leader, a weak-minded person would say something to the effect of, and I've heard this time and time again, and I've been that person before.
I have too.
That, oh, it's okay, man, you know, in due time, something like that.
Sure, something to gloss over what they really need to hear.
Exactly. Or, you know, at least that's some of the weakest conversation right there is using those words, at least. Yeah. At least you were able to do this. At least you were able to remove such and such from your life. But what men need to do is call them up. And most men would see this as calling somebody out, as far as what happened the other day in a particular example with a gentleman that came up to me in the gym. And this is by no means to put somebody out there or anything like that, but it's to give you an example of how those conversations should go, coming from somebody who wants to help somebody become better because they know their potential. They know they are better than what they are exhibiting. So if somebody comes up to me like they did the other day and they said to me, hey man, I've removed all these vices. I've been listening to your stuff, but I'm still working on removing nicotine, for example. You know, at least I was able to remove those other ones, but you know, I'm working on it. And if I remove it right now, my body will shut down or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
And what I told him was, that's the excuse that you tell yourself. And I left it at that. That's the excuse that you tell yourself. And that's not to be an ass. That's letting him know that you're better than that. Marinate on that for a little bit. Comes up to me at the gym today, says, man, that stuck with me. I threw the vape out the window last night.
Hell yeah.
So the problem that a lot of men have is they are so afraid to have that integrity to tell somebody what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. Most people will tell people what they want to hear. You know, that's why people go online and they seek validation, because they know people are going to, you know, sympathize with them, empathize with them. Oh, I'm having such a bad day and this and that. You know, it's our job as men, as leaders, as strong men, mentally strong, to tell somebody what they need to hear. Yeah. And it's to help them become better, because we know what their potential is, because we know what our potential is. And if we can do it, we know somebody else can do it. Don't give them this weak talk. And I'm tired of hearing men talk to other men in such a weak capacity and accept those excuses. Like, oh, I'm trying to stop drinking. F that, man. Stop trying and start doing.
Doing it.
Oh, you know, I can't go cold turkey. The hell you can't. Yes, you can. It's so weak. And I don't want to be surrounded by any weak men like that, right? And nobody else should be wanting to surround themselves with weak men. No. Physically weak and mentally weak. But because what happens when you surround yourself with weak men?
That's your standard.
And it's not only your standard, but what happens to weak things? Weak things break. Weak things break under temptation.
Pressure.
Pressure, absolutely. And And I don't want to be involved with that. I don't want to be surrounded with that. You surround somebody who's not strong enough to remove vices from their life, and they meet your woman, right? You better be a strong man. My woman's very attractive. And I know none of the men that I surround myself with would have any sort of bad intentions towards my woman. But imagine surrounding yourself with a weak man who indulges in things like that, indulges in married women and things of that nature.
Yeah. Such a good point you bring up, man, which is it's not a call out, it's a call up.
Exactly.
That's such important verbiage, because as much as it's on the responsibility and the ownership of the individual to not seek the validation, to not live in victimhood, and to actually change their circumstances in their life, it's on us as leaders too to be able to detect when we see somebody coming to us, especially people that look up to us or maybe value our advice. We can't be the ones that just glosses over that and pads, their insecurities and the narrative that they've been telling themselves. So you did a very good job in that scenario, because a lot of times, and I agree with you, I've been in this place before. This is how I know not to do this. It's funny how, lessons learned like that can change the course of how you act. As a leader, if somebody comes up to you and they present a win, you can absolutely give them a pat on the back, but you should also in the same breath be challenging them on, okay, what's next, right? Because there's a very fine line there where when someone hears the I'm proud of you or good job or whatever, where they immediately go into complacency mode. And they don't have that same vigor and drive, because in their mind, they've received the reward for the little thing that should be standard issue. Right. And we didn't always have those friends when we were going through the trenches and learning that about ourselves. A lot of times that's just getting control of that narrative inside your own head, right? We talk about this constantly, where if you constantly pat your own self on your back for small wins, for big wins, and you aren't really critical about yourself with the losses, then you're not going to really be seeking that constant and continuous improvement like you should.
Right. And that's a dichotomy too, because, you don't want to be so hard on yourself. You want to be hard on yourself, and you don't want to be too hard on yourself at the same time.
Yep.
And that's the dichotomy, because there's a fine line there. Constantly beating yourself up, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better. And that's where that reflection has to come in.
Absolutely.
On the wins that you have had in the past. And because I'm the type of person that's going to kick my rear end. I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to say, if I'm not satisfied, and I don't get satisfied, but if I'm not happy with where I'm at in a particular area or situation, and that goes on for too long, I've got to reflect back on, okay, this is how far I've come, and this is where I'm at now. In that space between, like, man, I've come a long way, but I can still do better. It can't be a constant, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough, right? And some people may disagree with me on that, but it's that reflection that's going to be that anchor, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm probably the hardest. Nobody's going to be hard on me other than myself, right? I mean, I might have people who, like you, might say something to me, but I'm the one who's going to be hardest on myself.
Right.
And I have to be the hardest on myself.
Right.
And when I look in the mirror, I'm going to say, man, am I doing the best that I can be doing? And if not, then I've got to step my game up. What do I need to do to step my game up? Now, I've come this far, right? I've done some pretty cool things. I've had some great accomplishments. I've removed some pretty debilitating things from my life. Now that's great. Okay, what am I going to do next? Right?
Yeah, I think it puts this emphasis, and where guys really need to be careful too about how much they talk about their wins and their losses as well. That in itself is a dichotomy, because there's this middle ground of, if you know that you want to talk about your struggles and you want to celebrate your wins with someone, that's totally fine. Find that one or two guys that you are really trustworthy with, and seek them out. But I think after a while, if your brother is in alignment with what you actually should be doing, you kind of have to stop talking. You have to continue putting in the work, because you may be just stifling really big wins or accumulating really significant losses because of how much chatter there is. Now, I understand that this has to do with upbringing and a bunch of other things. Usually if you didn't have a great relationship with your father, you're often seeking out that validation and that conversation with other men, and that's totally fine. But at some point, you have to realize that you're also making yourself vulnerable to a fault. And that could really affect how you progress forward if you don't know how to compartmentalize a lot of those really small wins and losses and keep moving forward without having the urge and the need to decompress and to download that information onto somebody else, right? Like, for example, if I'm working out in the gym and I have a PR on bench press, but then the next day I land, 5 new membership clients that really helps my bottom line at the gym and stuff like that, that it may not be a time and place for me to share either of those wins. And because one kind of trumps another, it may not even be like worth me even bringing up one of those wins. I guess where I'm kind of going with that is like, it's also a dance whether or not you should share information or you should just keep executing. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on who you're sharing it with too. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're, let's say you have somebody that you're accountable to. Let's say, for example, you and I are having a conversation 6 weeks ago and you're struggling and you say, man, I haven't landed any gym clients in such and such amount of time. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do to change that? What are you going to do to step your game up, so to speak?
Yeah.
And then you've been putting in all this work from 6 weeks ago up until now, and you landed those new clients and you hit that PR at the gym, then you can share that with me. Right?
Sure, because you're already abreast of that information.
Yeah, I already know what's going on. Man, you've been struggling, and then boom,
Sure.
right? The fruits of your labor over the course of those 6 weeks. Now, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do next? So you're not going to go another 6 weeks without having any results.
That should always be the follow-up question.
And so it's our job as good friends, leaders, with the people in our circle, to call you up on that, right? Not to say, oh, that's awesome, man. Great job. You deserve a vacation now. You deserve, go take yourself out to dinner. Go spend $300 on a good steak, right? That's not what I'm going to say. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to say, hey, great. That's awesome. It's like when my kid scores a goal playing soccer. Okay, awesome. You scored a goal. Daddy, did you see my goal? Yeah, awesome. Great job. Go score another one. Right? We don't stop there. Keep going. Keep getting after it. And I think most people, when it comes to those types of situations, they stop. Oh, awesome job. No, encourage them to do more, right? I think it was Ed Milet. I remember hearing him speak. I think he said, great leaders are always challenging their people. Always challenging their people.
I was just going to go down that route, because the best analogy I could think of is, let's say you work for a company, and times are good. Lots of wins are happening. Your portfolio looks great. Your boss is happy. In both the good times and the bad, there should be this critical analysis, right? If things are good, awesome job. But hey, we need to work on X, Y, and Z to scale to the next level, right? If things are bad, obviously it's going to be a critical conversation. Hey, what could we have done better? What are the things that we should be focusing on now? And not settling for less than the standard that is the operating procedure within that organization. It's the same conversation with your friends, right? Even if they are having and accumulating a lot of wins, there should still be this critical lens and that follow-up conversation that you have of, okay, so what's next? What are we doing now? What are you going to do to challenge yourself? What is going to elevate your game in this respect, in this regard?
Yeah, and not only that, but it's our job to be that example too, because we can't expect somebody to be doing more if we're not doing more.
Correct.
So, for example, if somebody says, "Man, I just," and this is just a simple example, "Man, I just ran the mile in 6 minutes and 27 seconds." And if I were to say, "That's it," come on, man, you can do better than that. But I'm running it in 8 minutes. Like it's, I have no,
Yep.
I have no stage there to stand on.
Correct.
Right. But if I'm running it in 5 minutes and 20 seconds, I can say, "That's it, man. Talk to me when you get down to 5, or talk to me when you get sub 6."
Right.
Right.
Or furthermore,
Or if I'm kind of hovering around the same area that he's at, okay, hey, listen, run it in 6 minutes flat, and I'm gonna run it in 5 minutes and 45 seconds flat. So that's gonna challenge him to do it better, right? So
Yeah.
always be challenging somebody.
well, I was going to say too, you also don't want to get caught in that situation where if you said you just ran a 6:27 and I 10 years ago ran a 6.
Oh yeah, we're not. No, absolutely not.
That does
we're
not count.
We're not talking about what you used to do.
No.
What you used to do is weak conversation.
It has to be present, it has to be relevant, and it has to have the promise of tomorrow.
Yeah, nobody cares what you used to do.
Correct.
I don't care what I used to do. I don't care what you used to do. It's all about what are you doing now and what are you going to do in the future.
Yeah, and going back to your point on reflection too, it's not to say that those wins you've accumulated in the past mean nothing, but in the grand scheme of today, as a man, if you're properly improving day in and day out, they are insignificant in some respects because you should be bettering yourself. Now, I understand if you have actual limiting factors physically, mentally, that come up, right? If you got cancer but even then, we've seen some pretty incredible testimonies of people who are missing limbs and are overcoming mental disabilities to do things that normal human beings can't even feat. So there's always going to be someone out there that is striving to do better than you. And there's also always going to be someone out there too that is praying for your worst day.
Yeah, absolutely. And competition is great, man. Competition is fun, but who are you really competing with? You should be competing with yourself. Should be competing with your best yesterday and working to get better than that. It's just that little 1%. You hear it, get 1% better every single day. And it's just constantly challenge yourself. Consistency is key with that too, staying disciplined and not allowing yourself to slip or fall off. And does it happen? Yeah, it happens. But getting back on track and knowing what you need to do to be able to get back on track as soon as possible, that's key.
Yeah, and that 1% better every day is a minimum standard too. Because as awesome of a cliche saying is that is, I think it's more often than not, just like how the path isn't linear, there's going to be days where you're 20% better than yesterday. But then you may have a day, 2-3 days down the line where you're, 0.5% better, right? Because maybe you had to take a rest day from going so hard in the paint, or something came up, God forbid, something happens and it completely derails your plans, which happens more oftentimes than we can count. You have to have that resilient mindset to be able to see past those harder days and realize that is going to yield a much greater return on the back end, especially in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing people need to understand too is you can't call somebody else up unless you're calling yourself up. That's why it's imperative that you're working on becoming the best version of yourself, chipping away at that every single day. working on removing the things from your life, working on getting better, getting fit, because you can't have those conversations with people if you don't look the part, if you don't act the part mentally, physically, spiritually. If you're not that guy, you can't expect somebody else to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why it's so important. You want and need to have those conversations with people, but you have to be that guy in order to have those conversations with people.
Yeah, it just further stresses the point of leadership by example is the only way.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
have to have that as the foundation, because nobody's going to listen to you, nobody's going to follow you, nobody's going to ask advice from you, and nobody's going to take you seriously. Like, respect is a direct line from someone who condones that, right?
Yeah.
We hear all the time, you have to give respect to earn respect, but giving respect to yourself by being that leader
Boom.
is what condones the respect from other people. Because you may not even have a single interaction with somebody, but they may reach out to you, and say, hey, I heard you, saying this in this reel, or I heard from this According to Men podcast that I need to do X, Y, and Z. And it really struck a chord with me because I've been going through all this stuff leading up to Little Did You Know. And thank you. And as enlivening as that is for us to hear, it's more confirmation that the leadership by example that we are conducting is what's necessary.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah,
thought
good
this was
talk, man.
Great. Another really short and sweet, man. A lot of these nuggets and these lessons that we talk about, guys, it's from experience, it's from the heart, and it's real stuff. You're not going to hear a lot of this from your friends, and that's why we give this advice, because we were right in your shoes not too long ago, and we want to just continue to give you that avenue and be the conduit for your success in your future, and help you guys to get unstuck, to become fit, fearless, free, and fulfilled. And if you ever have any questions, just please reach out to us. We're on Instagram at According to Men. We're on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel. And we also have an email. You guys can email accordingtomenpod@gmail.com with any specific questions you have. But anyways, we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.